Hello and welcome to the screencast for how to use Freefall, which is a NoSQL database for mobile application backends. So let's see, first thing we need to do is we need to get the code for Freefall, which is on GitHub. So we just check it out of GitHub like this from the Freefall DB project. Okay, this is going to create the Freefall DB directory. And we can look in here, and here's all the different code and things. And so if you look in the doc directory, these are the tutorials. So we're going to be following the app tutorial, which walks you through making a simple app, which is a leaderboard service. So basically you can submit scores, and then you can, and they'll be sorted into a list, and then you can get the sorted list. And so that's just a simple service to demonstrate how it works. And then also in here there's the user tutorial, which just has all the different commands that you can run and what they're all about. So okay, so first step, we're going to run the setim script, and what this does is it just sets the path so that you can get to the Freefall command line tool. So for instance, now if we run Freefall help, it'll show all of the different commands and things that you can use in Freefall. And okay, so step one, we got to make a new project. So we say Freefall new, and the name of the project, we're going to call it leaderboard. So we run this, and it creates the directory and all of the example files. So we can go in there, we can look, we can see that there's the config.yaml file, and then there's the app directory, and it's got actions and transforms, which are currently empty. So so that's the skeleton. So mainly what we have here is we have this config.yaml that just has some example code in it to show you how things are formatted in there. So the first step in making a new Freefall app, now that we've generated the skeleton, is we want to edit the config.yaml file to tell Freefall what our app looks like. Okay, so let's see. So the first part here, app name, that's used in a lot of places. That's used for the name of the Google App Engine application, and for the domain for that application will run on. Also the jar file that's generated for Android is going to be named using the app name. So let's just call it leaderboard, because that's what our application does. And then the package is only used for Java, so that's only used for the Android code. So we'll just use it com.example.leaderboard. Version, that's used by App Engine. You can have multiple different versions running of one application on App Engine, so we'll just leave that as 1. And then this is the main, the bulk of a Freefall application. We got actions, transforms, views, and models. And we're going to totally replace these example ones with the ones for our particular application. So let's start with our models. So there are, in this application, there's going to be 2 different models. There's going to be the one where you submit new scores, which is going to be a bag called unsorted scores. And a bag is just it's a lock-free data structure where you can just throw a bunch of stuff in it, and it's unordered and it's unindexed, and therefore you can just add things without worrying about a collision. So that's a good data structure for putting in your kind of initial submissions. But then the output of this database is going to be some sorted scores. So we'll call those sorted scores. That's going to be an ordered list of scores. That are sorted just like you would normally see in a leaderboard. And so we're going to make that a list because we want it to be ordered. And so that's it for our models, right? So we got your unsorted scores where you submit new scores, and then your sorted scores, which is the list. So then to make something a view, you really just name different models that you want to be views. So a view is part of your public API, so clients can access these views, and views are pre-serialized into JSON and cached in memory, so they're very fast to access. But there's like a computational cost to pre-computing these views. So you only want to make things into views if you are actually going to fetch them. So for instance, unsorted scores we're not really going to look at. We're just going to be putting things in there and then from there they go into the sorted score list. The sorted scores is really what we want to be looking at, so we're going to make a view called sorted scores. And that's all you have to do. You just say the name of a model that you've already defined in your models in your views, and then it becomes a view. And so there's no code associated with either models or views. This is all you need to do, is just in your views and your model sections you just specify them, and in the models you say what type they are, and then they'll be automatically created the first time that they're used. So then let's get into actions. So actions are also part of your public API. Actions are where you can write to the database. So for instance, we want to let people submit a new score. So we're going to call that report a score, and then the arguments here are going to be the different parameters, the types of the different parameters. So in our case, what do we have? So to report a score, you need the username and the score. So the username is going to be a string, and then the score is going to be a float, say. So that's it in terms of defining our actions. That was pretty easy. And here's a little bit more complicated is the transforms. So transforms are not part of your public API. Transforms happen internally inside the database, and so they're triggered off of changes in models, and then once they're triggered, they do computations to generate changes in other models. So basically your actions are your inputs, and then transforms happen internally, and then you can chain them as much as you want, and then eventually you get to a view, and then the view is the output. So what you need to say in here is first the name. So in our case, the transform we want to take the unsorted scores and then sort them to produce the sorted scores. So our transform is going to be called sort. And then you need the triggers. So in our case, we only want to recompute the sorted scores when the unsorted scores change. So basically when there's a new score. So we're going to make unsorted scores. It's going to be our trigger. And then the output is what we're actually going to be which model we're going to be modifying. So it's going to be sorted scores. And then there's one other section here. We're not going to need it, but you can say inputs, and then you can put a list of different databases that you might, different models that you might want to use as input. But we're not going to use that here because all we need to know in order to modify the sorted scores is we don't need to know what the new score is that was added to unsorted scores. So that's it. That's our whole configuration file for this simple leaderboard service. We've got a report action that lets you report a new score. We've got a sort transform that sorts the unsorted scores to make sorted scores, and then we have a view for the sorted scores, and then we got our two models, unsorted scores and sorted scores. And that's it. Okay, so now we have configured our config.yaml. The next step is we need to actually add the code for the action and the transform. So for the action, you're going to put that in app actions, and then the file needs to be the same name as the name of the action. In our case, our action is called, let's actually just put that on the screen. There we go. So our action is called report. So we're going to make something called app actions report.yaml, and that's going to take two parameters, a string and a float, representing the username and the score. Okay, so this is a Python function that we're going to define. It has to have the same name as the file, so report. And then our arguments, as we were just saying, there's a string that's username, and there's a float that is the score. Okay, so that's our definition there, our method definition. And so now we actually have to write the code to actually do something in this method. So what actions do is they modify models, and so actions all have access to a variable called state, and that allows you to modify different parts of the database, different models. And so in our case, what we want to do is we want to add this username and score to a bag, and so we're going to use the add method on state. And then state takes two parameters, and those are the path and then the value that you want to add to that path. So the path is the path to the particular model that you want to modify. In this case, and that's a list of strings. In this case, it's a top level model, so we're just going to have one string, and it's just going to be the name, and it's going to be unsorted scores. Okay? That is That's the path. And then the value, you can really put anything you want in the value. But let's put a map. We'll give it a key username. That's the username. And then a key score. That's the score, just to keep it simple. So that's it. So this report action will add this dictionary of username and score to the unsorted scores bag. Okay, so save that. So the next step is to define our transform. So you put that in app, transforms, and then the file has to have the same, did I call that report.yaml? That should be, that's silly of me. That should be app actions report.py. There we go. That makes more sense. Okay. There we go. All right. Now back to what we were doing before. So we want to make a app transforms sort.py because that's the name of our transform is sort. Then again, we're going to define a function, and then it's going to be the same name as the file. It's going to be sort. Okay, and then it's going to take as parameters first all of the triggers, then all of the inputs, and then the output. And in our case, our trigger was the changes to unsorted scores. But it's important to note, you don't get passed in here the entire model of unsorted scores. You just get the changes that have been made to it. So in our case, when we add a new score, we'll just get that new score. So we're going to call that unsorted scores changes. And then there were no inputs in this particular one, so we'll delete that. And then output was sorted scores. Okay, now so what we're going to get here in unsorted scores changes is going to be it's going to be a list of changes, and in our particular app we're only ever going to have one change, which is going to be we're going to add a new score. So we can get that by saying unsorted scores changes sub 0 will be the particular change, and then that change has a type. In this case, it's going to be add. We know that because that's all we ever do in the action is add things. And it's going to have an args, which is going to be the value that we put in there. So we're going to say value equals change sub args. Will get us that dictionary. So to just look at that again, that's right, it's going to be this dictionary of the username and the score is going to be the value that's going to appear in args. So then we can say username equals value sub username, and score equals value sub score, right? Okay, so now we have our username and our score. And so we need to put this in sorted scores, which is a list. But we only want to keep the most recent score for each user. We don't want to have every score everyone's ever submitted in there. And so before we actually put it in the list, we're going to remove the old value. So if you just say sorted scores.remove username, that will look through the list until it finds the first instance of that username, and it will remove it. And since we're only going to have one, that will be all of them. So now the user, this particular user, is no longer in the list. Now we can say scores.insert score username, and this puts that username in a position in the list determined by the value of the score. And this is going to be sorted automatically, so it'll be when it's serialized to JSON, the usernames will be in order of the scores. Okay, so that's it. So that's our sort transform. Okay, so we are now done writing the code for this leaderboard service. Alright, so the next step, now that we have written all the code, is we need to use Freefall to generate the server-side code that will actually run on Google App Engine. So you just run Freefall server, and that generates all this code. So you can look here in gen server. This is the entire Google App Engine app, which is pre-generated for you to use. You don't need to know anything about Google App Engine. Like it just generates it, then you upload it, and then you're ready to go. And then the other thing that we need to do is we need to generate the client-side code. So in this case, we'll just generate the Python code because that's all we're going to use. So you just run freefall py, and there you go. It's generated the code. So if you look in gen client py, you'll see that there is one Python file for every different part of the public API. So for every action and for every view, there's this command line Python program that you can run to access that part of the API. So you can run report.py to report new scores, and you can run sorted scores.py to get the list of sorted scores. But before we can run this, we need to run the App Engine code so that we have it running on the server. Now you can run it on Google App Engine, in which case you would just do Freefall deploy, and then that runs it on Google App Engine. Or for development purposes, you can run it locally in a local App Engine server. And currently the client code is configured to talk to that local server. So all we have to do is go to the App Engine launcher here, and then I've actually already got this configured to run it. And so you just hit run, and then wait a minute, and then here are the logs, and you can see what's going on the back end. And then it's running. Okay, so we're going to report a score, and we run gen client report, and then if you recall, it requires a string that's a username, so we'll call it user1, and then a float that's a score, and we'll say 1,000 points. Okay, so we'll run that, and there won't be any output because this is a write-only service. So let's just put in another one here just to get some data in the database. User2 will give them 2,000 points. Okay, and so now we can access the sorted score list because that should have been pre-generated, basically every time we update using it by running report. Okay, so let's run that. We'll do Python gen client py sorted scores. And there we go. It outputs the JSON of the sorted score list. And so we can keep adding them. So let's say we'll have this we'll have this bad user who's not very good and can only ever get to, like, say I don't know, like 100 points. Okay, and then we'll have this good user that gets like 10,000 points. Okay, just to make sure that the sorting is working. So now if we just run sorted scores again, it's like every time we update it, it regenerates the view. So there we go, bad user, user1, user2, good user, right? So you can see, it's actually sorting the users. It's not just appending them, as we add them. It's actually, doing sorting. So in fact, let's see, we can add another. Let's see, we'll make a user. We'll call them medium user, and we're going to give them 1,500 points. So this should be right in between user1 and user2 when we insert it. Okay, right there we go. See, right? So everything works. Everything stays sorted. So that's about it for the tutorial. So if you want any more information, I'd look here in the doc directory at the app tutorial, which is basically what we went through, and then also in the usage tutorial, which has all the different commands that you can do for generating Android code, for instance, which is something we didn't talk about, and then stuff like Freefall compile will generate both client and server. Freefall deploy will actually deploy on App Engine, and yep, so that's about it. Okay, thanks for watching.